Alright, welcome back. People, happy Tuesday, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you had a great weekend. And we are back with day number 12 of Metaphysical analysis of Drakensang Online. Yes, last time we did a lot of analysis regarding the mid-game gameplay mechanics, especially the elemental system of the game, and I think that by now we've gotten to the main. We've pretty much already figured out the main elemental system of the gameplay mechanics and overall um, the main ideas in these 11 previous days of all of the gameplay mechanics and the level design. So, people, we will proceed to the next topic of analysis that you can see in the title description. Pretty much the storyline. We'll get into the grandeur category of the analysis. Quite important as we explore Atlantis, this zone that sadly it's a huge flaw in level design, if you ask me, because most players actually are pretty much forced to skip all of these maps that you'll see here, because here I had to tell an NPC of my deeds, something like that, there, because you get up to level 45. You can get up to level 40, 45, let's say, something like that, in the previous map of the game, and then you come back to this one. You can come back to this one, but it's quite hidden, and it goes back down to level 30. Now, I was explained why that happens by a user here in the chat, in the Twitch chat. That is because the game originally was meant in its level design to be at level 50. Let us see here. So much to understand a compound's effect on simple little beasts like this than it is on more complex creatures. Perhaps I can create an antidote to put an end to the corruption. We are basically in the Atlantis section. We are doing all quests for. I'm finishing some side quests there that you can see here. Well, not side quests; they are part of the main story. But the zone in general, is like a big succession of side quests. Let's say, Ja Alado in a shari of your deeds. This is a shari, if I'm not mistaken, or is it not? Yeah, it is. It is. I have to find the correct ocean creature to tell the This one? No, I think it had a different name. Our scheme, blah blah blah, to enslave a god. Throw it was the first woman's trickery. If Julda, the other guy, can create an antidote and might help the guard between the Great Oceanus and Gorga. Yeah, basically the idea is like in Xenoblade Chronicles that they have two titans fighting endlessly under the sea. Gorga's poison is still effective. Julda will need a few things from the heart of Atlantis if she's to make an antidote. We cannot do without her now. Woods do retrieve some snare plant spores and a J-Bax for her. Okay. So I turn in everything. No. Okay. We updated that quest. I think the name was wrong. Yes, we love you, player. Here you go. A lot of coins. Look for the Holy Hammer. Collect spores. This one. I had to finish this one as well. So basically for today, precisely, I wanted to talk about the storyline of the game, the plot cohesion, the character cohesion, everything related to the psychological sense of realism, psychological sense of cohesion, that the game produces on the player, basically. So as you can see, the first talking point that I wanted to highlight regarding the plot and the storyline and everything related to the grandeur category of the analysis. Basically, as you know, people, I also analyze the psychological impact of, as I've said, of plot, character cohesion, both of them, on the player and those things, pretty much, because it does have it does play an important role in determining basically if the game is realistic at the end of the day. And you must be thinking, well, but it could be a fantasy game, Eraser. Why is it about realism? Yeah, I've always explained this, and it will be one of my talking points of today. Basically, a game can go for a fantasy setting, but have cohesion and realism regarding its characters and story and everything. So, the first talking point that I wanted to mention regarding this important category of the analysis is that not a single character in this game is voiced. Now, we need to interpret this in the context of the isometric action RPG genre that it belongs to. It's not something like, I don't know, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, for example, or Mass Effect, or any of the classic, or Skyrim, any of the classic modern open world RPGs that could, in which the story does play an even more important role. In isometric action RPG games, and this is the first talking point, precisely, is that the story doesn't have a primary role. But still, this leads me to the first flaw, still the characters are voice acted. In fact, the first Drakensang, that was a real-time with pause 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons game, also known as a Baldur's Gate clone, basically. Even if that's the case, the first voice line was the first dialogue line was voiced of every single character. Then the rest were not. Same formula as Baldur's Gate. And Baldur's Gate is a much older game than this one. But even if we go to another example that belongs to the same genre, because those would be real-time with pause 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons games rather than isometric action RPG. So as you can see, in this game, all of the dialogue lines are all read, but they are not. Jacob, how you doing? You, how you doing, Jacob? How you doing? Hope you had a great weekend. Welcome, Jacob. How you doing? How you doing? Last time we were talking about I remember that last time on Thursday when I was playing Titan Quest, you were surprised that I remember it drew my attention that you were surprised I was not good, just making Dungeons and Dragons map from League of Legends. Oh, that's amazing! That's amazing. You do Dungeons and Dragons maps from League of Legends. You like Dungeons and Dragons? I played you know that the original Drakensang, the Black Eye, I think it was. No, the Dark Eye. That I played. It's on YouTube. That I played. It's basically precisely like Baldur's Gate. It's a 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons real time with pause game. I was precisely mentioning the first one, the first Drakensang. Drakensang is basically, it was originally born as the German version of Dungeons and Dragons, basically. Basically, it was born like that, and I played the first game on stream. That's how District found my streams, in fact, originally. And then he suggested me to play this one. I played Dungeons and Dragons several times as a player, but this will be my first time as a DM, as the dungeon master, because our dungeon master. Oh, sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that. That's tragic. And what you're playing with the new rules with 5.0, the tabletop game. You're playing the American version, the original Dungeons and Dragons with 5.0, I presume the new version. Still level 47. Shame on you. No, Jacob, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to deal with so many games. I don't have time to deal with so many games, sadly. Besides, I like playing them like this. Slowly doing everything in order, like perfectly, paying attention to the story and everything. No, we have a beta version that gives you freedom. It's called Cogent. It's like a divergent version. Like what was the? There was another one that was amazing. The one that was developed by Old Cat Games, I think. Pathfinder. Pathfinder was also. Okay, it's like a divergent version, like Pathfinder. Okay. I get it. I don't know that one. It's an interpretation of Dungeons and Dragons 3.5. It's a bit more hardcore. It's similar to Baldur's Gate. It's like it's like for people who didn't like the changes of 5.0, basically. Oh, yeah. But the problem is that it was developed, well, in a country that got into a war, and well, because of that, for example, the poor people that developed the game that had nothing to do with the with the other topic, well, precisely precisely, sadly, the poor Pathfinder game is a bit, let's say, silently silently banned. Let's say that it's not as popular, but it's quite good. You have the video game, you have the video game on Steam. Pathfinder. Uh, you have two. They developed the second one, Wrath of the Righteous. The first one is Kingmaker, Pathfinder Kingmaker. But anything that says Pathfinder is that it's a reinterpretation of 3.5. Oh, well, we can talk about Dungeons and Dragons if you play. I never played kind of like the tabletop game IRL. I did beat Baldur's Gate on Throne of Ball difficulty. I love Baldur's Gate, and it's a Paramount uh, game. It's a piece of gaming history. Baldur's Gate as the first one that made real time with pause popular as a genre on PC. So the gaming part of it for gaming history, let's say, I that's why I admire Baldur's Gate a lot. So the first one, and I think the third one it's an absolute prostitution what they've done with it. I bought Baldur's Gate 3, but to run the mods on Evelyn, probably the engine, the graphics have to be set to high, which I can't do. Well, Baldur's Gate 3, it's basically, well, I've insulted that game a lot, honestly, because the producer, in turn, David Walgrave, Google Baldur's Gate 3, Evelyn. Well, more or less, what is it? Let me check. More or less, what is it? In the meantime, I can. The original house, who's Evelyn in Baldur's Gate 3? Who's Evelyn? It doesn't say. It says with Y. It says with Y, not with I. Photo. Photo? It's a girl. Evelyn Baldur's 3 wallpapers. And the Mods on Evelyn. Okay. I get it. Yeah, okay. You wanted to mod the appearance of one of the characters. Okay. I get it. No, you know, Jacob, when I played another game 2 years ago called Hellgate London that I highly recommend to anyone. Hellgate London. In the first stream, I pretty much talked about Baldur's Gate and well, I insulted the game, of course, and the prostitution of David Walgrave. It's a Belgian game for those of you who don't know. Baldur's Gate 3. Basically, Wizards of the Coast, the company behind the tabletop game, the original Dungeons and Dragons, gave the license to Larian Studios. Larian Studios is a Belgian studio that was coming from developing other games called... Take the snare, plan, spray, sport. Prostitution is great. Alpha character are fine. No. But good one. That was well played. That was well played. No, but I talked about the prostitution that was Baldur's Gate 3 because the producer, David Walgrave, big game already. The producer, David Walgrave, decided to insult when he was asked about what was going to be the combat system. The producer decided to insult all of us who liked Real Time with Pause and the original Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, saying that it was an outdated gameplay mechanic that had no room in today's modern standards because they are way too modern and way too intelligent for us all, that we are all idiots, the original players of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. We are clearly all idiots. We eat milk with a spoon, clearly. And because of that, since we don't know what's good for us, he decided to insult us, saying that there was no room at all for real time with pause combat, which was the combat of the original Baldur's Gate. Pretty much. Well, for those of you who don't know, basically it's a Belgian company that was coming from Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2. I'm not sure if I understand you, but does it bother you that there's no Gamba there? I don't know what Gamba is. No, what bothers me is that the producer insulted us, all of us, saying that that the combat of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, real time with pause, has no room in the market. Basically, that it has no, that there isn't a place for it in the market. That it was outdated, and basically that the game had to be turn-based. I'm talking about the combat system of the game, what basically the prostitution that I'm mentioning. That they basically copied. They were coming from Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, where their previous games of this Belgian studio, Larian Studios, that they were turn-based. Streaming Drakensang Online. You said only Thursday. No, Thursday is for Titan Quest District the other way. On today's Tuesday, right? Today's Tuesday. Tuesday, Drakensang Online. Oh, Tuesday is Drakensang Online. Thursday is Titan Quest. The other way. The other way, District. The other way. No. If I started on Tuesdays, this one. I started it on Tuesdays. On Thursdays, the Titan Quest. Sorry, I don't think I understand you. My English isn't the best. Today the goal is to beat the 2 bosses for you. I beat 1, District. No, Jacob, don't worry. Basically, Jacob, have you seen gameplay of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2? Not the third one. You know that the third one is turn-based. You take turns. Nope, well, that's the problem. It's not your English. Jacob. Only Divinity 2. Okay, perfect. Okay. But not Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Okay. Okay, that's the problem. It's not your English. But since you like overlevel, you should do it in painful. I think I increased the difficulty one notch. It went up to 52. There. There, I did already this trick. You read my mind. Well, I'm glad that by now you can read my mind, District. Now I'm glad for that. No, Jacob, it's like this. Google any gameplay of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and you will see that the combat. Well, it's an interesting story. Doing already nice. Doing already. Let me explain it to you. In the 90s, well, this is an amazing story that everyone should know. Everyone should know. In the 90s, all games, all RPG games in general, they were turn-based. They were turn-based, basically. There was no real-time combat, right? I know it must sound quite weird to you because right now the division is extremely accentuated. It's extremely, it's clearly divided. You have turn-based RPGs and and action RPGs, like this one, isometric action RPG games. But in the 90s, they were all turn-based, and real-time really didn't have. It really didn't have a place for it. And Baldur's Gate, the first one, the father of all classic RPG games, it created the genre basically, took the first step into creating the concept of real-time combat in RPGs in general, in adaptations of Dungeons and Dragons games on PC. Of course, you had real-time action games like The Legend of Zelda, but the RPG component wasn't as strong. Oh, I see. Well, you had action games like The Legend of Zelda, for example, on the Nintendo 64, 1998. It was like Dragon Age, indeed, like Dragon Age Origins. Like Dragon Age Origins, that for me is one of the top 10 games of all time. Dragon Age Origins. Yeah, well, Baldur's Gate is the father of Dragon Age Origins, is the father of Knights of the Old Republic, is the father of all real-time. That genre, Jacob, is called real-time with pause. Oh, it's called real-time with pause combat. Real-time with pause. It's in real time because it's a still turn-based. I'll explain you how it works. Internally, the turns still exist. It's just that you don't see them. You issue the commands in real time, but internally, there's an internal clock in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, in Knights of the Old Republic, that sets a specific amount of time, I don't know, 2 seconds, 1 second and a half, that is a turn. The turn is measured by real-time actions. Indeed, it's still turn-based. It's not 100% action like this one. I get it. Well, that combat system was the classic adaptation of Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, and well, you also had advanced Dungeons and Dragons with Ultima Online, even older. But that adaptation, it was an adaptation, that system, of Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, which is still, it was among the most popular, even if not the most popular edition of it. Before, modernly, Wizards of the Coast used 5.0, and because Wizards of the Coast wants to impose 5.0, they of course also agreed with Larian. They picked Larian Studios to do a turn-based game because they were coming from Divinity Original Sin that is more similar to 5.0 rather than 3.5. That's the key. Now, that's one thing That's one thing, and a completely different thing is insulting the player base of the original two games, insulting the original player base of the original two games, saying that that real time with pause is an outdated combat system. It's a completely different story in that sense. You can switch it; it's your product. You can choose whatever you'd like. But another thing is sending the main producer to insult the original audience, the original audience, the original um, player base of is it one-handed? No, two-handed. Of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Okay, so the producer, David Walgrave, I can give you the name, said basically that it was an outdated combat system. Okay, now, since nowadays I know that 5.0 is quite dominant, and that's why they picked Larian Studios with turn-based combat gameplay mechanics, I explained all of this in the previous game that I analyzed in Drakensang 1. Basically, that is 3.5 precisely. The original Drakensang, it's a Dungeons and Dragons. I highly recommend you as a great entry point. Drakensang 1, The Dark Eye. This is actually Drakensang 3. I first played precisely Drakensang 1. It's a clone of Baldur's Gate's combat system. What? Yes, it is. I have the videos over at YouTube. I didn't know. Click on the YouTube tab here, and there you'll have my YouTube channel, and you'll see that it's the previous analysis that I released. It has to be among the final videos. I think I released the final analysis some weeks ago. Drakensang 1 and 2, they are 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons games. In fact, I streamed them so the original audience of this game could discover them. But yeah, since the category doesn't have any audience, no one watched me. But District did find my streams, and indeed he recommended me to play this one instead. And well, from here I can ensure that people at least get to know that one also exists. So yeah, basically that's the idea. Drakensang 1 and 2, I explained in the first video of Drakensang Online. The original developers, Radon Labs, they had the license of the Dark Eye. The Dark Eye is a German version of Dungeons and Dragons, precisely the original version of Drakensang. It's called the Dark Eye. It's a tabletop game, eh? You also have the tabletop game. It's a German version of Dungeons and Dragons. And well, there's the PC game that I played. You can check out the YouTube banner, and there I completed it basically 100% with all of the side quests, analyzing it. I scored it and everything as I do with this one, and precisely it's like the tabletop game. It's like playing Dungeons and Dragons, a German version of Dungeons and Dragons, and it has real time with pause combat. Exactly like Baldur's Gate. I highly recommend you as a great entry point because it's a bit more, it's much easier than Baldur's Gate's complex armor system. Baldur's Gate is a quite hardcore game, the first one and the second one. So yes, you have the Dark Eye 1 and 2, Drakensang 1, the Dark Eye, and then the second one is the River of Time. I need to play it. So yes, I play sometimes 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons games on stream, and because of that, it's like that. Now I see that you are googling for Drakensang 1, the Dark Eye. You can check out the YouTube videos. I played it 100%. There aren't any other 100% completion gameplays. I think I did every single one, analyzing it, and yeah, it was a great game. Quite fleshed out in that sense. I did. It looks nice. Yeah. It was quite good. And the combat system is the one that I'm talking to you about. It's inherited from Baldur's Gate, which is Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 with the real-time with pause combat system. And that is what Larian Studios in Baldur's Gate 3, by order of evil wizards of the coast, prostituted with Baldur's Gate 3 because they turned. You understand what they did by now, I bet, if you've seen the combat gameplay. They turned Baldur's Gate into Divinity Original Sin. You see the problem. They slapped the combat gameplay mechanics of Divinity Original Sin, which was their original creation of Larian Studios. I did beat the first Divinity Original Sin on the highest difficulty, just so people see that I've mentioned this several times, just so people see that I'm not just talking because I am a nostalgic idiot that only likes Baldur's Gate. Of course, I think Baldur's Gate 1 is a superior game without a doubt. It created a genre, and divorced the RPG genre from turn-based. It created a subgenre inside of it. But I did beat Divinity Original Sin 1 on the highest difficulty. And it basically copies Dungeons & Dragons 5.0. While the Dark Eye, while Baldur's Gate, they all do the real-time with post-combat system of also Dragon Age Origins and Knights of the Old Republic. They copy Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, which I think it's a much superior version with the real-time with post-combat system, of course. Why? Because I'm not telling you objectively why it's a superior system at the end of the day. I did explain it in my analysis of the Dark Eye, Jacob, in the stream in which I entered the Dark Forest. Not at the beginning, in the second pilgrimage. I explained it once I entered the Dark Forest. I think I went over 5 talking points, some shit like that. But basically, just so you have a summary, because, well, if you want an extended explanation, it's there. But just in case, basically, real-time with pause demands the player to take into account positioning in a much more complex way than full turn-based. Basically, in Divinity Original Sin, positioning is quite easy. In Baldur's Gate is the same. In Baldur's Gate 3, I mean, positioning is pretty much the same. You can take your sweet time thinking what you're gonna do in real-time with pause as well, because you can pause. But even if you pause, once you move your character, the clock is ticking in real time. And every slight movement that you do, every single slight movement that you do, will have a much bigger window of consequences compared to turn-based. It will have a much bigger, and because of that, since the consequences are much more pronounced, they are much more sensitive. It can be like in a matter of seconds if you moved incorrectly. It's much harder, and because it's much harder, the abstract complexity of the gameplay mechanics is higher. The games are basically more difficult, and because of that, real-time with pause is the superior system, without a doubt. Well, this is something that most modern players will disagree with, I presume, calling real-time with pause outdated because of this difficulty, because Baldur's Gate 1 will kick their butts on Legacy of Ball difficulty. It's a real challenge. Besides that, I have more arguments. I don't know if you're interested in me in me getting lost in thought about all of the things that I can tell you about 3.5 being an amazing system compared to 5.0. But yeah, basically the idea is that we already done this. Oh, look at that, we kill everyone. But basically, yes, the idea is that 3.5 Dungeons & Dragons was a thing before 5.0. And everyone must be. I bet you are wondering by now. And then which one is 4.0? Well, it's the previous game that I also explored. Knights of the Republic. It's basically World of Warcraft. 4.0 is basically World of Warcraft. That wasn't popular at all. I think it's the best one. But well, it wasn't popular at all with the tabletop audience. I bet you know more than me about that. So yeah, pretty much. So yeah, and well, when they released Baldur's Gate 3, Baldur's Gate 3 is basically Divinity Original Sin 3. It's not Baldur's Gate 3 because the combat system is 5.0. It's Divinity Original Sin in that sense. So yeah, it's absolutely sad, but they decided to release Divinity Original Sin 3 instead of Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of the combat system. So yeah, and besides that, as I said, the main producer, you can look for what he said. His name is David Walgrave. He's part of a Belgian studio. He's from Belgium. He basically insulted everyone, all of the classic players of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Among them, myself, I guess. So yeah, basically that's the idea. Then in this story we cannot forget Diablo 1. People, I love talking about this topic because it's basically the main moment. It was another dungeon. Okay, it was basically the main moment in gaming history in which the RPG genre divorced from full turn-based combat. It's sad that now we've gone back to what we originally got independent from. In that sense, I'm not saying that turn-based isn't good. For example, I think that Pokemon is a work of art. I think that a lot of turn-based games are amazing. Divinity Original Sin 1 was a good game, a very good game, but it's not a real time with pause. It's not real time with pause, basically. It's not Baldur's Gate in that sense. So there's even more. Do you know how, for example, Diablo was to be, people? You know that legendary article that I read back when I played Hellgate Lantern. And basically, the main developer behind Diablo was also dealing with this because real time with pause was still not completely divorced. We had Baldur's Gate, the father of all RPGs, with real time with pause. It did a partial separation from turn-based, but it still wasn't complete. The one that completed that was Diablo 1 then. That then spawned this genre, the isometric action RPG genre. The one that added the action part to it. Alright, my inventory is full. That's the problem. And Diablo 1 then finished the process because Baldur's Gate activated the clock, activated the internal clock that I told you that would make the turns real time. And then Diablo 1, not Diablo 2, we're talking about Diablo 1, it turned the clock down to 0. Straight up. And that's how real-time combat in general, in PC RPGs, was born. In general, people. In general. And that created the isometric action RPG genre that you see here, or in Diablo, and all of the ones that are now called Diablo clones. Right? It's like that. Baldur's Gate put the clock down to 0 in real time, but still allowed the player to pause it, and internally it wasn't down to 0. It was like to a set amount of time per turn. It's just that the player doesn't see it. And then Diablo 1 finished that and put it to 0. So it's extremely sad for me. extremely sad that after all of this long, painful, uh, slow process that took a lot of years, I bet you understand that after this long process that took a lot of ingenuity, a lot of creativity, a lot of incredible amount of brain energy, let's say, an incredible amount of effort, after all of that time to turn the clock down to zero internally in RPG games, then comes David Walgrave, the main producer of Baldur's Gate 3, and says, "Ah, no, you are all idiots because real time with pause is an outdated combat system, and well, I don't know, and it has no place uh, in the modern world with modern standards or whatever the fuck he wants to say." So basically, the idea is that yes, he insulted the player base of the original Baldur's Gate, Jacob. Don't know if you liked my story. You went silent. Probably my story was extremely extremely. I hope it wasn't so violent at all. Uh, I'm doing that. Those maps. Ah, okay. But you like the story? It's quite interesting. I'm still here. Ah, okay. No. If it was interesting, the story. If it was interesting only. Oh well. I presume that if you listen to it, it was still interesting. But yeah, that's basically the reason. That's basically the reason why I said I told you previously, because I know there are some strong words that basically Baldur's Gate 3 for me it's a prostitution to the gaming industry basically. uh, because it went against a process of years. XD. Well, yeah. I don't mean to never to offend any fan of Baldur's Gate at all, of Baldur's Gate 3. Of the first ones, if you're a fan of the first one or the second one, you are with me. You're with me in this army. I get I get it. It's closer to divinity. It is divinity, in fact. So yeah, basically, well, you got the idea. Well, see, that's important thing to always learn in new things, people, regardless of how shitty the opinion of a crazy streamer Eraser may be. But yeah, that's the important thing. At least now you have the framework. This is usually what happens, people, when what was your favorite boss so far, says District? Without a doubt, Callus. Callus, without a doubt. Callus, and then the machine. But first Callus. Why? Because Callus does force the player with a one-hit kill to go back and forth in that zone. While the machine is also a great challenge, the one that I did in the Dwarf City. I think you were there, District. Yeah, you were there when I did that boss fight. I was expecting the machine first. Yeah, the machine would be a close first. It would be a close first. But Callus, because of the I get what you say, is the best one regarding the mechanics. Is the best one regarding the mechanics. Yes, it has the most complex mechanics. Yes. But because of the level design and the pacing of the progression, the Calix boss fight, I remember it vividly, because if you don't farm for that boss fight, like I didn't farm, it forced better reaction times than the machine one. The machine one is slower in its attacks if you pay attention. District the instead Callus, when she does the final attack that deals damage all over the place, if you don't exit the room for a second, you get killed in one blow. Without the boosted gear, people, of course. We're talking about how it is meant to be to be played without the boosted gear. Then if you take the snare, plants prayers to Jeweler, 10? Ah, but I need more probably. Then if you have boosted gear, that's another story. But without boosted gear district, I think I did it alone, that boss fight. I think none of you were here because it was by the end of the stream. Back then, it was one of the first. The reaction times of Callus were much higher than the machine one. The final attack, especially that covers all the ground, forces the player to retreat if he's not using boosted gear, and if he doesn't retreat, he's killed in one blow. We are talking about without farming, without over farming, without using boosted gear, without, let's say, beating it through brute sheer force. We are talking about like I'm playing it, like farming only the necessary to unlock the quests. In that sense, I do agree that the second one would be the machine one, but because it has better mechanics, it has the most complex mechanics. I get what you say, but the reaction time for me, I was precisely mentioning it regarding real time with pause. Hey, we can add. Hey, I can also include you in the debate that Jacob and I were having. District. Which one do you pick? District. Baldur's Gate 3 or Baldur's Gate 1 and 2? That is real time with pause system, like Drakensang, the previous one that I played, like Drakensang 1, or full turn based. District is going. Baldur's Gate 3, yeah. I think District is also going to pick that one if I had to guess, because he liked turn-based ones. I think he once mentioned to me that he liked turn-based ones. Baldur's Gate 3 XD, but you haven't tried Baldur's Gate 1, Jacob. That's an unfair comparison. I did play Divinity turn-based, the first one, and Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I did both of the styles. You would need to play at least one real-time with pause game. But play Dragon Age Origins. Ah, well. You would pick Baldur's Gate 3 over Dragon Age Origins. Okay. Okay, well, for me, needless to say, people, that's a sacrilege. For me, Dragon Age Origins is it's a top 10 games of all time. It's a top 10 games of all time. Baldur's Gate 1 too old. Well, David Walgrave loves you, Jacob. David Walgrave loves you. He is the perfect. It's nice. He loves you, David Walgrave, the producer of Baldur's Gate 3. Basically, he would be called a perfect, but in Dragon Age is not. There is no Evelyn. Sorry, it's because of the character. So the character cohesion is what you care about. But you have Morrigan. Morrigan is a perfectly designed character. Morrigan. Isn't it? Going diff? Gooning diff? No, gooning diff. No, but you have Morrigan, I guess, for that. You have Morrigan. Come on, poor Morrigan. She's beautiful as well. No, you have Morrigan. Smash as well. No. No, but the gameplay mechanics. Well, I don't know if that's a fair talking point. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to classify that as picking the best game because it has let's say the best girls. Well, but you have Morrigan there. You have Morrigan. The storyline is pretty complex and well designed. In Dragon Age Origins, people. Has anyone beaten the Harvester on hardest difficulty? Has anyone beaten the Harvester? The expansion, in the Awakening expansion. Who has beaten the Harvester? Dragon Age Origins. Raise your hands. The Harvester, the real final boss of Awakening, of the expansion on the hardest difficulty. It took me a whole day. It's probably the best boss fight I've seen in 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons. As difficult as Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. As it's absolutely brutal. The Harvester. The Harvester, if anyone can do the Harvester on hardest difficulty, you have my utmost respect. It's brutal. It's brutal. I remember it was without a doubt the. I know you would smash as well Morrigan, I think, in that context, because I was naming her. You would pick that Evelyn above Morrigan? Come on. Oh, damn it, poor Morrigan. Poor Morrigan. Okay. Be right back. Okay, Jacob. No worries. As I was mentioning then to District, precisely, regarding the bosses, in the Callis boss fight, I needed to have much better reaction times without boosted gear in that sense. Because, as I said, the final attack, especially, it would kill you in one blow. It would kill you in one blow, straight up. But yeah, pretty much I would pick Callis and then the machine, without a doubt, because it has the best mechanics. But in the case of Callis, the reaction time pushes the player much more. It pushes the player much more because of the pacing of the boss fight. The pacing. I generally like. Well, I don't know if you've noticed by now, people. I favor faster gameplay mechanics as more complex than slower ones. And you must be thinking, well, but that's an unfair bias for turn-based games or whatever. No, but there are objective reasons. Because in turn-based games, as I was mentioning to Jacob, precisely, it's related to the previous topic. In case any of you, District, or anyone else is in the room, basically I was mentioning we are having a debate between turn-based, Baldur's Gate 3, and real-time combat. Basically because of the contrast of Baldur's Gate 1 and 3. And I have objective reasons. Objective reasons. I mentioned them when I played Drakensang 1, the Dark Eye, the previous one to this one. When you found me, District, precisely as I was playing that other game. The objective fact is that real time has a component of reaction time that turn-based doesn't have. And you could think, well, but maybe with in a turn-based game, there's a degree of, I don't know, a degree of a strategy that is so brainstorming, so incredibly complex that it completely squeezes your brain and you have to think a lot to beat a specific boss fight or whatever. Yes, while in action games you just press button, kill, press button, kill. Yes, well, of course, I will not deny that there are action games in which it is like that. It's a button masher, as it's usually called. For example, the Dynasty Warriors games and the Musou genre in general. It's a clear example of this, and that's why I think it's a flawed genre and it's altogether useless when the correct genre should be hack and slash instead of the Musou genre of just button mashing without any kind of sense. So, in that sense, it is true. There are mindless action games, but talking in abstract terms, if the action game is executed properly, that is, that there's a degree of a strategy involved in the button mashing, that is, executing several actions in a quite brief period of time, then the abstract complexity of the gameplay mechanics is exponentially enhanced due to the fact that it incorporates the element of reaction time compared to only turn-based games. In that sense, of course, there are also shitty turn-based games in which you don't have a strategy as a counter-argument as well. For example, modern Pokemon games have degraded their difficulty so much, so much that it's like that. Or I don't know. There are easy, let's say, turn-based games. It's not my field of expertise, so I don't know many. But basically, think about any of them in which you can just farm and brute force your way with your stats rather than the strategy involved in the attacks that you do. So think about that, people. Think about that for a second, and well, you'll see that there's a component of reaction times, of reaction time, that you don't find, that you really don't find in turn-based games. Both genres can be done incorrectly and correctly. Both can be done incorrectly and correctly. But if both are done correctly, the real-time game will always acquire a much higher degree of complexity. The ceiling is higher. The ceiling is higher of the abstract complexity of the gameplay mechanics. As I always mention, the higher the abstract complexity, the better it is. The better it is the game, because it enhances replayability, it enhances the psychological sense of progression in the player, and it enhances the amount of time, the depth in the amount of time that it takes for the player to figure out how to be effective in combat, basically. So, yes. The consideration of face, I intend the process, spell, soul, oceans, protection, once the blessing. Okay. Today we were going to talk about the storyline of the main topic of analysis of the game. First point, talking point. None of the characters are voice acted. The first line should at least be voice acted. The first line should at least be voice acted. The first line should at least be voice acted. In Baldur's Gate, it's like that. It's the first line. In Drakensang 1, precisely the Dark Eye, it's the first line. Precisely, is the first line. And in others, they are even fully voice acted. For example, in Diablo 3, they are voice acted, or in Diablo 2. Granted, here they would need to voice many more characters, but they had to when they developed the original game. But yeah, basically that's the idea. That the first flaw that I encounter regarding character cohesion and development is that they are not voice acted. That's the thing. The first flaw that I would highlight. The second one would be that the evident flaw, that the storyline is not connected enough. The main storyline is not connected enough. You skip from section to section following the level design of World of Warcraft, in which basically you go around from zone to zone without a common storyline in between. It's like secluded to each zone. It's isolated. It's the same with this game. But the fact that the zones are kind of like unrelated to each other, because basically you go from one to another one, and you have to unlock the sections just by leveling up rather than completing the story. I would tie it. I'm back, Jacob. Welcome back, Jacob. Welcome back. I was basically getting into the topic of analysis of today of the storyline, basically. But yeah, no. One thing, Jacob, that I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, and then it got lost in the chat. Well, first of all, I hope you love Drakensang 1: The Dark Eye. As I said, I completed the game 100%. It's the one that I played right before this one. And it will be like Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. I would suggest you play that one because it will be like Dragon Age Origins. It will be, in fact, it's the same almost as Dragon Age Origins. It's the same. It's the same. It's the same. It's exact. It's a carbon copy of Dragon Age Origins. Even the interface. And it will be a perfect example of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, like Dragon Age Origins, precisely. Though, what I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to tell you, because last time I ran out of time as I was killing everything in Titan Quest, precisely, that it drew your attention, that you thought, when I told you on the during the other stream on Thursday that I was from Argentina, and it drew your attention that you said on chat, "Oh, I thought you were European somehow." Well, it's precisely because, contrary to Central America, and I don't like leaving people with these dubs. That's why I have an Ask Me Anything. It's because precisely contrary to Central America, in Argentina, we are not kind of like, we didn't mix with the few local population that it was, because it was unpopulated, contrary to Central America. That's why you may see that, well, genetically, I am more similar in appearance to precisely any average Spaniard or Italian in that sense, because basically it was like the US and Canada, the southernmost cone. You don't I don't expect anyone from, as I said, in general from Central or Northern Europe to know this. It's known in Italy and Spain, but not in and even more or less, but not in countries that didn't get to colonize the Americans, basically. So it's because of that. It's because of that. It's because of that. Because then maybe you saw a Mexican, for example. You saw a Mexican, and maybe you thought that, for example, Argentines are somehow similar. In the US, it's pretty common to think that, for example, all South Americans, that we are similar to Mexicans. And well, precisely, the difference is that in here it was a non-populated zone, and we were so much to the south that there was also no African slave trade originally as well. So because of all of that, as you can, that's why it drew your attention. Yeah, I wanted to answer that because I remembered it from last stream. I said, "Oh, damn it, he must not understand why it is." It's because of that. It's because of that. Basically, we are kind of like directly Spaniards or Italian colonizers from originally back then and World War II. And in Central America, no, there was a mix. Here there wasn't. Basically, that's the idea. So yeah, that's the reason. That's the reason. So I wanted to get to that because it's interesting that there are so many of our countries that generally don't appear in kind of like, let's say, history and those things, and well, that's there are a lot of details. There are a lot of details that basically have no explanation if you don't have the historical context, and that's it. Okay, people. Getting back into the topic of analysis, as I was mentioning, the main idea with the character cohesion in Drakensang Online, as the first flaw that I wanted to highlight is that not a single one of the characters have a voice line. Not even the first one. They are not voice active at all. That's the first thing. The first flaw that I would highlight. Second one. Even Drakensang 1, precisely, the Dark Eye, has the first line of dialogue voiced, if they didn't have a budget for all of it. This one doesn't have a single voiced character line. Second one, the main storyline is not connected appropriately in Drakensang Online. Why? You go from area to area without a common plot point to connect them. Basically, you finish one area and it's tied to your level. Precisely the mechanic that I was mentioning with District the other day, that he helped me, is that I had to basically level up in order to progress through the story, instead of having a conductive. I would have designed it like this: having a common story, progressing through it, and instead of limiting what the player can access because of the level, I would have tied it to the progression of the story instead. And that would have ensured, first, to have a common. It would have solved two problems at the same time. That's the thing. That's why it's a flaw. Not precisely a small flaw. It would have solved the fact that the game doesn't have a general storyline that connects the different areas. Instead, it has like isolated storylines per area, following the model of World of Warcraft. And second, it would have given the player much more freedom. As I've said the other day, if the player wants to be reckless regarding level design, people, what do you do? Do you limit the access to zones that are of much higher level to the player? Like in this game? Or would you give the player the freedom to access them even if he's going to be killed? I would let the player access the higher level zones even if he's going to be killed. Why? Because it would give the player a degree of freedom that will make him be responsible for his own choices. But maybe the player is a genius, let's imagine the hypothetical situation, and even if he's not meant to survive that zone, even if he was meant to be killed, maybe he survives, and maybe he's able to farm the zone, and maybe he's able to find a way to play the game that it wasn't originally meant to, with a lot of creativity. For example, surviving a zone with one-hit kills because he has, I don't know, amazing teleportation skills as a mage, or hypothetical situation. Imagine that hypothetical situation. That way, by not prohibiting the player to access that zone, I've given him the freedom to exploit his own creativity and find new ways to play the game that not only creates a community and enhances and enriches the gameplay mechanics of the original system, but also makes the overall experience more creative. That's why I would never lock the quests depending on the level of the character like this game. The second negative point, as I've said, is that it destroys having a conductive, a general storyline that ties together the different zones of the game. This game behaves like World of Warcraft. Isolated zone, some quests, isolated zone 2, some other quests, isolated zone, some other quests, and and each of them has its own mini storyline, but they are not connected. That's the thing. There isn't a main plot. So, no voice acting, no connected game plot. The third talking point in that sense, give me a second, let me read this one. Thou hast our thanks, this skirmish at least goes to us. But what say you, the weapons seemed to be stockpiled for a military excursion? Perhaps Ashraya is truly in danger. The stockpiling concerns me. Vorlok, a Gorgon leader, clearly intends to dispatch an expeditionary force to Asharia. If he dies, this danger dies with him. I hope the two of us have not betrayed Ashraya's position. Please consult with the council. We have to talk to them, of course. Precisely. And the third talking point would be the positive one. Because so far I've commented two flaws. Not having them, not having the character's voice lined at all. And then, of course, not having a general storyline that connects the different areas. So what's the positive point? The positive point is the variety. The variety, and then I have a fourth one, which is the cultural aspect of the game. But getting to the third talking point regarding the storyline, the positive aspect is that the character cohesion is pretty well done. They act according to their personalities in this game. This one we've already finished it. Let me see. We have to finish this one. This one. The characters do act according to their personalities, but the problem is that since it's all written like this, it feels self-contained in each area. It does not transcend as a general plotline among all areas. You get what I mean? It feels disconnected, the plot, from each other. This is the same problem that I think is the biggest flaw of World of Warcraft, that it has isolated plot lines, and it's precisely what Star Wars: The Old Republic fixed. It's pretty much the only MMORPG that fixed it, having with the story missions, precisely. It's generally the problem with MMORPGs in general, not having the characters voice acted and not having a way to tie together, to connect together the isolated plot lines, which are generally good, of the different areas. So it suffers that problem, that was a second talking point, from the MMORPG genre. From this period of time, the influence of World of Warcraft, you can see it here as an echo of its level design structure. The path described to us by Oceanos lies in prayer. You remember, Oceanos is the whale god that is fighting endlessly against the other poison god of the seas. They are locked in an endless battle, similar to Xenoblade Chronicles. In Xenoblade Chronicles is the same. See, for example, there you have another great example of that one is completely real time. Xenoblade Chronicles is the most similar game in terms of the combat gameplay mechanics precisely to Knights of the Old Republic because of the camera. That's why I love it. At least the first one. I need to play the other ones. The decision between assassination and the chance of an expedition might discover Ashraya, but a terrible choice. If this blind fish cannot find our hidden sanctuary, then we would be killing Borlok for nothing, even if he's one of those championing war. I say no. Okay. Perfect. That was the council. We consulted with them. Third talking point, as I said, positive one. Characters act according to their personality. For example, the Atlantean people here, they are more like the Protoss, more calm and collected and take decisions as a community rather than individualistic choices. For example, like the other races that we've seen here, like the dwarves being depicted properly as stubborn and everything. We could even see a character, the King Murolosh, is in the first game. Is in Drakensang the Dark Eye, or well, at least the beginning, the first human encampments. We can see that it perfectly follows the tradition of, let's say, classic Lord of the Rings universe. You know that Lord of the Rings inspired Dungeons and Dragons originally, people, right? It was it was like that. It was which one was first, the egg or the chicken? Well, the first one in this case was evidently the Lord of the Rings. First, it was the Lord of the Rings, then it was Dungeons and Dragons, and from there the video games was pretty much like that. Then the tabletop game, and Juldan V. Elviel have joined G. Alado in opposition. Then Vala and I are outvoted. This is dire news, for if the enemy's expedition reaches Ashraya, our fate will be sealed, and I may well bear the blame, since I ordered thine assaults, our assaults. The council has voted against Borlock's death, yet the council is not infallible, and it was just such an error that led to the decline that led in the past. They use the present tense there. That led to the decline of Atlantis. I cannot watch history repeat itself. Yeah, they use the present tense there. They should have used past simple. Borlock, the commander of the expedition, must die. Wilt thou do this for me and for me alone? Enslaved God, that's the other one. There we go. Poison Chalice. A ghost attacked you. The spirit of a human woman. Gorga, she's moving. She's right here. Well, okay. We got that side quest done. Done. Look for the Holy Hammer's level strap in Istra, the Eternal Battle. To report. No, those are in different zones. This one? How to do this one? Ah no, we're first this one, followed by the Z. Let's go. So basically people, as my fourth talking point is the cultural aspect, and that's the positive aspect. This is related to the other game that we analyzed last year, to Sacred 2, precisely, which is the cultural impact, the cultural influence of the game. You know that this game was developed by German developers, and you must be thinking, well, what does that have to do? Who cares the nationality of the person who develops the game? No, it does matter, because it will influence the worldview. It will influence the worldview of the universe that the person is created, because at the end of the day, we are a bit limited. We can transcend that, but we are limited by the knowledge of what surrounds us. What do I mean by that? If you played Sacred 2, or you watched my gameplay last year, people, you know that it's a carbon copy of the topography of the map it's an inverted map of Europe, basically, of our beautiful Europe. It has the Roman Colosseum in my beloved Italy. It has German portions. It has portions that resemble Switzerland and Central Europe. It has an island that has the same shape as the United Kingdom. It has a zone that is like Ireland as well. It has a zone that is like a volcano, like Iceland. It has everything. It has everything. It has a zone that is like the south of Spain, pretty much. Sacred 2. You get it? It's basically a copy of Europe, the map. Okay? Got it? Basic idea. Okay. The climate of that game is also a copy of Europe, precisely. And the degree of precision that the developers achieved with Sacred 2, that I awarded that game a 10 out of 10, of course, not because of that, but because of many other aspects. It was a 4-hour review that I did, in that sense, of how majestic the game was in all aspects that you could possibly think about. But basically you get the point. The German developers of Sacred 2 used the knowledge of everything that surrounded them to create the world map of it. Now, I'm not saying that is impossible for, I don't know, a Japanese developer to develop a game that resembles an area from a different continent of our real world. But the degree of precision that they achieved with Sacred 2, for example, was unique. And when I say it was unique, I mean that the climate was the same, that the historical monuments were the same and located at the very specific same zones. Of course, for example, the volcanoes were only situated in the zone that was similar to Iceland, for example, even if there are some in Italy, for example, as far as I know. But basically, the idea is that the degree of precision in the execution of that idea was much higher because of the cultural impact, because of the cultural charge, let's say, the cultural ideas that the developers put into the game because of being German in that specific case. Right? That's the case. As I've said, Sacred 2 had zones like that were, for example, like the south of Spain. It had zones that were like Germany and Central Europe in general. It had the Roman Colosseum with Italy, of course. It had, as I've said, an island that was the same as the United Kingdom. It had a zone with castles that were exactly like medieval French castles, right at the correct spots. Okay, people? So it had a degree of precision in the execution that is not impossible, but is quite difficult to achieve. It's quite difficult to achieve if you don't have a direct contact with the direct with the historical with the cultural charge related to it. That's the idea, with the cultural charge related to it, with the cultural aspect that related to it. So you can execute it. For example, I don't know. The same goes, for example, with the Japanese developer, with Nintendo developing I don't know, Pokemon 1 and 2 that are like real life regions of Japan, or all of their games. You can see it vividly in any Japanese game that follows that pattern, that is based on any location of Japan. Okay, so that's the second positive aspect of Draken. The fourth aspect, and the second positive aspect that I have found in terms of the storyline and the cohesion of the level design and everything of Drakensang Online. Why? Because this is a German developed game, and a lot of the zones do resemble medieval Germany, of course with the fantasy touch, with the monsters and everything. That's a part of a fantasy aspect of it. And that leads me to the fifth talking point, a quite amazing and interesting one that I always bring up because it's debated endlessly in any forum that you may find, that you may stumble upon, which is people, the main talking point. I've seen this point brought up endlessly. It's a fantasy game. The characters are not meant to be realistic. They cannot be realistic. Well, it's a game. It's a fantasy game. The characters are not meant to be realistic. And that is the perfect point, because there I always highlight this difference. One thing is the world building, that it has components of a fantasy setting, and there's a completely completely different topic, and it's a completely different topic, the character cohesion. What do I mean by this? In Sacred 2, for example, there you can see it vividly, or I don't know, in Skyrim as well, or The Elder Scrolls or The Witcher. It is a fantasy setting. Yes, the world building is a fantasy setting, but that does not mean that it has to affect the personality of the characters to such degree as to eliminate the historical component of the period of time in which they are being developed. You'll see with this amazing example. In The Witcher 3, of course, we have the monster hunting and all of the fantasy setting and all of the fantasy elements that, of course, do play a role, and perfectly. But at the end of the day, you can see it more vividly in The Witcher 1. That is precisely like the games that we were discussing. Like it is real time with pause. It is real time with pause. It's like it was inspired heavily by Baldur's Gate. See how big the influence has been, because how big the influence has been, because even in 2007, that the first The Witcher was released, even there, and even in 2008 with Dragon Age Origins, how long the influence reached. But well, The Witcher 3 or The Witcher 1, yes, you have the monster hunting and everything, but they still act like medieval characters. In that sense, it's pretty well done. Especially in the first chapter of The Witcher 1. They act perfectly according to a medieval setting. The same goes for Sacred 2. For example, I don't know, something silly. The characters, the serfs had to pay tribute to the feudal lord, for example, and the feudal lord had the right, for example, to enter your house and take your wife, for example. He had the right to do that, and those things are another game that does this perfectly. Is the precisely that is based on the old Zone of Bohemia, that it was a kingdom back in medieval ages there in Central Europe. It was a Kingdom Come Deliverance. Kingdom Come Deliverance does this, not with the final expansions that they did because they had to appease a crowd that was criticizing it precisely because of being way too realistic. Sadly, this is sad that people want to judge history with modern standards. But basically, in The Witcher 3, there is a fantasy element. There is a component of fantasy, of course. But then, the characters do act cohesively. They act cohesively according to a medieval setting as well. It's not that you have to choose between medieval setting, fantasy elements, let's say specifically. Fantasy elements or medieval setting. No. The idea also of the Lord of the Rings, that all of this steam, it comes from the Lord of the Rings. It stems from the Lord of the Rings. Sorry, not steam. Stems from the Lord of the Rings. It comes from there. But they were still medieval characters in the Lord of the Rings. Fantasy, a dwarf, an elf that lives forever, or the dwarves, and the same here. But they were still medieval characters, and that implies a lot of things that, for example, in modern games, like for example, Baldur's Gate 3, I think the characters do not act according to a medieval setting. They went full fantasy. They forgot about the medieval part of it, as if they were not compatible. You get what I mean, people? As if they were not compatible, when when precisely the majestic thing was that the Lord of the Rings mixed medieval fantasy. It combined the genres. Here they are separating them and leaning as much as possible towards fantasy, and the medieval portion is left behind. Well, why, you must ask? Well, I have reasons that are much. This, yes, is a much, much deeper rabbit hole. We're kind of like getting into one rabbit hole after the other. I wish to strengthen the council, but we'll get into it. And now I myself am the one who deceived it. It was the best choice for Ashraya. Now I am left to contemplate what consequences I must face for this deed. But I have one consolation. Our hidden sanctuary remains safe. I give my thanks to thee. Thou hast served nobly and well. Okay. We have one more, right? Or not. The enslaved god, here. No. This one is in another area. Here, this one. The Age of Rage. So at this point, one positive aspect that I wanted to highlight of Drakensang Online as my fourth talking point is precisely that the characters act according to medieval personalities. I think it doesn't get to the level of realism with the fantasy component, without forgetting the fantasy component. I think it doesn't get to the level of perfect realism of The Witcher 1 or or Sacred 2. I think that in that sense, if you want a perfect example of what I'm describing, you have to play The Witcher 1. In The Witcher 1, in the first chapter, the main topic is that in a town, for example, the authority of the Roman Catholic Church was still strong, and in The Witcher 1, in the first town, the authority was precisely the Reverend of the Stone, like it was back then, for example. And because of that, there's a degree of precision in the description, because they are kind of like hunting. They are basically hunting a witch, and you have to choose which side to pick, if to protect the person or to. In that sense, that's something that that precisely Polish developers get most of the time perfectly, because they are kind of like in between the influence of the Roman Catholic authorities. They were back then, and maybe even today. I don't know about the current situation perfectly, but in between that influence of the medieval age and precisely the Protestant influence. In that sense, that wanted to fight against. This is based on real things, you know. People, it happened in reality, in the not only in the political aspect of it, that it was. We're talking about the 1200s, the hundreds in general, the year 1000, 1000, sorry, 1000, 1000, basically the 1100s, for example. We're talking about that period of time. There were two philosophers, basically. One was called Thomas Aquinas, the father of scholasticism, of my school of thought, and the other one was William of Ockham, who was kind of like the so-called first Protestant. And well, that battle of ideas, that medieval battle of ideas, is perfectly depicted in generally in The Witcher. It's perfectly depicted, because you have the influence of Thomas Aquinas with all of the. Oh, I'm at the cap here. Destroys darkness. I know. Then it doesn't. We don't need that. So you have that, and you can see it all the time in The Witcher 1. You can make choices like supporting the stances of of the Catholic Church, let's say, supporting the Protestant stances, or supporting like a neutral stance, which in reality that's the fantasy part. It doesn't exist. Generally, it's way too difficult for that to exist in that sense. So yes, basically you can see how deep it is. You can see how deep it is. So in that sense, see how the cultural aspect of the game is influenced by the nationality of the developers, and of course the, as I've said, the knowledge that they have when they get to develop the game with all of their previous experience in their heads, in that sense, with all of the knowledge that they bring from previous past experiences. See how interesting it is. And you must be thinking, well, but that's not much of a difference. Oh yeah, it is a lot of difference. It is a lot of difference because generally most modern games dissociate the historical part. They destroy it altogether with the excuse of it's a fantasy setting. But yes, as I've said, the fact that it's a fantasy setting does not mean that the characters are meant to have a dissociated personality from the period of time in which the game is being developed. That is, so you can get the idea, people, vividly. You can incorporate fantasy elements in The Witcher, but why is it that The Witcher 1 is so good, and The Witcher 3? Because the characters still act cohesively according to the historical personality of a medieval setting. It doesn't forget about the historical part. That is the key why it's so good at character development. So incredible at character development. Besides the stories and the fantasy setting and everything. Well, hey, I looted a legendary. A legendary one-handed staff. It's not boosted, huh? It's not boosted. Oh, that's good. It also looks quite good. Look at that. Look at that. It looks amazing. This one doesn't have any gems. Cannot use gem on this item. Yeah. Engrave that so we make some room. So basically that's the point that I wanted to highlight today. In the case of Drakensang Online, hey, that stuff looks amazing. Look at that. I think it's the best looking stuff I've ever had in the game. Let's see if the damage is also as good as it looks. Yeah, it does seem a bit better. Does seem a bit better. Let's see, a bit under pressure. Remember, I boosted the level of the mobs here, people, just so it's not easy. Oh. No, let me move. Couldn't move. Well, fuck. Maybe that was a bit too much. Maybe that's a bit too much. Yeah, let me revive here so we don't have to go back. I had an orb there. I just couldn't move. That was a terrible start for the new stuff. That was a terrible start for the new stuff. It's the stuff, poor unlucky stuff. It was a poor stuff. It didn't have a good start with me. Ah, they're slowing me down. That's quite good. Okay, I see. So I'll keep my distance a bit with these mobs, and they explode as well. There we go. Oh, right, they are looting the. They are dropping the stuff that we have to loot. Okay. Perfect. So there you can see it, people. That's the main. See here, I had some life. This one. Ah, it was a boss. It was a champion. No. Wait. It was a champion, and that shit on the ground deals periodic damage. I see why I died. Okay. Wait, let's keep our distance. Ah, they also explode when they die. Okay. They deal area of effect damage as they die. There we go. Phantom, yo, how's it going, Phantom? How's it going? Last time I was playing Titan Quest. How we doing? Amazing. I just looted the new stuff and I got killed. Yeah. I'm going through Atlantis here. A zone that most players district told me that they ignore it. Oh shit, it killed me. Okay. Okay, now this is a challenge. I love it. So because you have to kind of, it's locked behind kind of like increasing the level of your character, and then um, not only that, you go back and it's of a lower level, uh, so yeah, people generally don't explore this area. So yeah, I cranked up the level a bit, so it's a bit more difficult here. Yeah, I'm kind of like doing the full storyline altogether. Could you recover, Phantom, that you were extremely tired the other day? Could you recover? Because I felt so bad that you were so exhausted. Hopefully the stream is a bit of company in that sense. I'm glad for that, because I know how it is to come back extremely tired and yeah, not having energy for anything. It's a terrible feeling, people. In case you don't know, it's a terrible feeling. So yeah, and he was tired the other day when I was playing Titan Quest. So yeah, hope you recovered. Best wishes. I know how it is to come tired like that, extremely tired. So yeah, pretty much. Hope you could rest during the weekend in that sense. So yeah. I'm analyzing the storyline, basically, Phantom. I'm on the 4th talking point, just so you have a reference. I was basically criticizing that the game has no voice dialogue lines, and I was also here debating with Jacob. I was debating about turn-based versus. Today had day off. Just finished my stream. Well. I'm glad for that, people. In case you don't know, Phantom also streams. He's another great, amazing guy. You can check out his stream. The Need for the whole day. Oh, damn, that one is tough. And he precisely is also an absolutely amazing guy. So yes, yeah. Well, that's tough. I know how it is. Back when I was hard, yeah, of course. Him and Flying Energies, and I think Ambra used to stream. I think he said. I don't know if he's still streaming, but yeah, Flying Energies, amazing guy, and Phantom as well. They both stream. So yeah, check out their. If you're watching this as a YouTube pod, they are also the same. You Google BJ Phantom DSO. That's the account. So yeah. By the way, I could successfully add you on Discord. Phantom. It worked. I could find the username. So I was mentioning the storyline. And it's not voice acted in this game. I highlighted that as the first talking point. The second talking point, Phantom, that I highlighted was more or less that, yeah, while besides not being voice acted, the storyline in this game is not tied together. The different zones, they are like isolated. Of course, we'll be waiting for questions. No, which questions? Regarding what? Regarding Discord? No. We'll be waiting for questions. Regarding what? The questions. Sorry, you got me lost there. On Discord. Questions of what? Questions like about what? About the analysis. Oh, the reviews. No, because if you, I don't know, of the game, whatever you want. Actually, okay. No worries. I generally don't bother people. No, if you can, well, we can. I generally do game recommendations and those things. Yeah, we can chat about some games and everything. Yeah, for sure. I was commenting precisely with Jacob a debate. Which one would you like? Do you like more, Phantom? Turn-based games or real-time combat? I was debating here with Jacob because he loves Baldur's Gate 3, and for me, Baldur's Gate 3 was an insult to the original Baldur's Gate and real-time with post-combat gameplay. And precisely, we were debating that. And well, the positive aspect, real-time combat, and what else? Turn-based would be against turn-based, against basically turn-based, something like Baldur's Gate 3, Divinity Original Sin 1, 2. Real-time, like Diablo and Baldur's Gate, even if it's real-time with pause, against turn-based. The debate. Which one out of the two? And why, in that sense? Here Jacob was mentioning, because of Evelyn in Baldur's Gate 3, I didn't know the character, and I brought up, well, but Morrigan is also beautiful as well. I have to look it up. I'm like turn-based, like Divinity 1 and Baldur's Gate 3. The style of Dungeons and Dragons 5.0 of being it turn-based rather than real-time like this one. Like taking turns to execute the attacks. Like Final Fantasy as well. Final Fantasy. The original ones, the old ones. Any Japanese turn-based games like Pokemon. I don't know. In my case, I like Pokemon. Like, it doesn't need to be Japanese. Like the two styles, because I was commenting to Jacob that I am a heavy critic, let's say. I'm a huge critic of Baldur's Gate 3, because they basically copied the style of combat of real time. Then, okay, you are from my club. You're from my club. Not maybe, perhaps not with the degree of criticism that I do of Baldur's Gate 3, without a doubt, but still, you're from my club, from real time. But Jacob, if you're still there, I think, for example, District also liked turn-based, the same as real time. I don't know which one he would pick. That's why I was asking him before. That one would be an interesting one. But yes, basically that. It's like I am a huge critic of Baldur's Gate 3 precisely because they copied the combat of Divinity Original Sin instead of continuing the legacy of Baldur's Gate 1 in that sense. And I was mentioning, I explained, oh, this thing is quite difficult to kill. Damn it, I need to be careful. So yeah, basically that's the idea. I told the story many times that precisely the creator of Diablo 1, people, not of Diablo 2, turned the clock down to 0, as I was mentioning, and finally divorced the RPG genre from, that was a nice dodge, from turn-based combat gameplay mechanics. I'm not saying that there cannot be good turn-based games, as I've said, as the same goes for real-time. There can be shitty real-time games, but I think that what they did with Baldur's Gate 3 was precisely an absolute prostitution, because they slapped turn-based combat on a franchise that was historically real time. Just because of trends, just because of the fact that Dungeons and Dragons 5.0 is more popular nowadays than 3.5. In that sense, we can see the influence of the tabletop games. You know how it is, right? Basically, the idea is that 3.5 was Baldur's Gate 1, real time with post combat, like Dragon Age Origins that Jacob also mentioned, for example. Amazing game, Dragon Age Origins. Everyone has to play Dragon Age Origins. The other ones of the franchise, I wouldn't say that they are that important, but Origins, yes. But that would be 3.5, an adaptation of 3.5. Then you have 4.0, which would be World of Warcraft. You know how it is, it was the other way around. 3.5 in that sense was the tabletop game being copied by Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale, for example. All of the Infinity Engine games that I have down here. It was a tabletop turned into a video game. But 4.0 was the opposite. It was first World of Warcraft and then the tabletop game. I explained it in the analysis of Star Wars The Old Republic, for example. And then 5.0 was, again, the tabletop game, extremely tied to Divinity Original Sin, precisely, in terms of video games. Extremely tied to Divinity Original Sin. But well, as I've said, there was no need for the producer, for Mr. David Walgrave, the main producer of Larian Studios, to insult all of the players of the original, all of us players of the original Baldur's Gate, and say that real time with post was an outdated system that no one cared, no one gave a shit about. That's the idea. That's why I generally don't like it. As I've said, I beat Divinity Original Sin 1, hardest difficulty, Commander difficulty. I think it was something like that. That is more strategic at that point, and while it was a good game, it doesn't reach even half of the complexity of Baldur's Gate 1. Just to have an idea, Baldur's Gate 1, it took me a whole month. Just to get through the first area, to understand the combat gameplay mechanics. That's why I recommend the first Drakensang as a good entry point to anyone who wants to discover 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons in that sense. And now we have the modern incarnation, which is the Pathfinder. Pathfinder is like 3.5 in that sense. If anyone wants a modern version of 3.5, it's Pathfinder, definitely the most successful one in that sense. So yeah, pretty much. Hey, there it is. There we go. The priest. Nicely done. Red colored powder. I think I got that. Defeat all enemies to summon the Sentinel of the Dead. No, we were here for the quest. What am I doing? Where's the quest? It was that boss, right? Yeah, it was that one. Return to the expedition. No, we had this one. Oh, alright, we've already done it. Okay. We're done. We're done in this zone, people. We can proceed with the main story. So yes, basically today I was analyzing the storyline of the game, basically, as well. And well, as my fourth talking point was precisely that the German developers here put a lot of amazing, interesting bits of cultural impact on Drakensang Online. In that sense, I think that one is a quite positive aspect. It's a quite positive aspect in that sense. It's a quite positive aspect because, yeah, pretty much the idea is that, well, it could, as I've said, the fact that modernly, don't you feel, people, that The fantasy portion of the medieval fantasy setting, the fantasy portion, is the only one they care about. That's the problem. And they ignore what I mentioned before, that you can have a game with fantasy elements like The Witcher, but still maintaining character cohesion, the character cohesion of a medieval setting. In that sense, that is the key. Right? This stopped working. No, it's perfectly working. There we go. There we go. There we go. It's perfectly working. I don't know why sometimes it says, "Oh, drop frames." No, it doesn't. It's as smooth as butter. In that sense. Okay, so that's the key. That's the key. I think that in modern games, not only Baldur's Gate 3, with that one I have the problem of the as I said of the combat that they chose, but in modern games they use the excuse. I feel they use the excuse of the fantasy setting to then ignore putting in the effort to make characters act according to their medieval setting personalities, and combining medieval setting with fantasy elements, like the Lord of the Rings, as I've said, like the Lord of the Rings originally did, effectively eliminating 50% of the complexity of the storyline and the plot. That's the problem. That's a problem in that sense, people. That the negative aspect of all of this is that the games use fantasy as an excuse. I feel nowadays for the plot cohesion. What has happened to our icons? What? Those speak truly, those canst see nothing wrong. Perhaps the sight of thy people is different. To me it is clear their power has been taken corrupted. The Gorgons have befouled them with poison. We must purify them. Glowing moss and holy water are a start, but will not suffice. If I am to neutralize the Gorgon poison, I require something to act as the exact opposite of the poison. A small amount of blood from one with a pure Holy Spirit would... I know Elder Jubal has a sister. Damn, this stream is way out of my league. It's like I'm listening to Chinese. No, why? Chinese, no, why? Why, because of the plot cohesion? No, it's because I... No, Phantom. No. I was talking about the cohesion. I was talking about the cohesion of the... About the cohesion of the plot line in that sense. No. Why you say that? No, Phantom, not at all. I don't understand anything. Well, we can go over it. I'm precisely analyzing the grandeur, as I usually call it. That's a French word that is also accepted in English, the grandeur, which is basically the psychological impact. I'm analyzing the psychological impact of the story on the player. Among those things, a character cohesion, because it's a modern excuse. I had 4 talking points that I summarized to you. Basically, that the psychological impact of the cohesion of the story of the game is limited by several aspects that I went over. Basically, just to have an idea that the voice lines are not the dialogue lines are not voiced, while in the first Drakensang, the first one was, for example, and the fact that the storyline in this game is not tied together between zones. They are like isolated zones. In my third talking point, I mentioned as a positive aspect that since the developers of the game are German, the game has a cultural aspect that is positive to it, that some of the zones resemble to medieval German villages. And in my fourth talking point, which was this one, basically, I was establishing a dichotomy I was establishing a dichotomy, a dualism, basically two opposed ideas, which is a flaw in modern games that this game and games of this generation got right as a positive aspect as opposed to the other two flaws. Basically, the dichotomy is that nowadays you must have read in Steam reviews or seen it over at YouTube or whatever that developers of modern games say, and even the player base, that in a game, for example, someone says as a criticism in a Steam review, for example, the characters are not historically accurate or they are not realistic, and I am kind of like translating and trying to understand to I'm trying to dissect what's behind that idea, why the player base complains about those things as the fourth talking point, because it's important in terms of the storyline. Basically, that's so it's summarized and you have a down-to-earth example. The characters play any modern game and they act like modern people. For example, they act like modern people, basically. That dichotomy. And that led me to explain that all of this genre is derived from Dungeons and Dragons, which in turn is derived from The Lord of the Rings, which was medieval fantasy as the genre. So, because of that, it's like a rabbit hole. I am kind of like getting into the deeper reasons as to why character cohesion is important and how well executed it is. So, what do they say as an excuse, as an explanation, let's say, nowadays, for starters? Generally, developers reply to that hypothetical, it's not hypothetical, it happens all the time, but let's think about it as hypothetical, that criticism, when the player says, over at Steam reviews or whatever, the character does not act according to its person. It's not realistic. It's not realistic. The character is not realistic. Alright, Phantom? You tell me if you still don't understand, but I bet you got the topic by now. The character is not realistic, let's say. What are they actually trying to say with that? What are they trying to say with that? That the character is not realistic. That is not historically accurate. That is not acting according to the personality of a medieval character. That's why developers put as an excuse modernly in a lot of modern games, that's my take on the topic, they use the opposite pole of the dichotomy, the fantasy setting, as an excuse rather than as a complementary element to the medieval setting to eliminate 50% of the medieval fantasy setting, which is the medieval portion. I was citing as an example The Witcher 1. In The Witcher 1, it's absolutely amazing. Same goes for The Witcher 3. It's absolutely majestic and amazing that characters act according to the personalities of real medieval people in that sense. Right? Without losing the components of fantasy. Of course, I'm not suggesting them to throw the fantasy element through a window down the sewers, to discard it. I am saying that the fantasy component in modern games is used as an excuse by developers to not put in the effort to make the research department of the development studio, to research about how a medieval society and personalities would work and combine them organically with the fantasy portion of it. Phantom, please tell me that at least I made my point so you understand it, because you said you weren't understanding anything because it was out of your league or whatever. It wasn't the case and it wasn't my intention. Flying Energies, how you doing? Oh, what's that? A strong guy. That one. How are you doing, Flying Energies? Hope you had a great week. Hope you had a great week. How you doing? My conclusion is what? That the stream can drive anyone crazy if you listen to me for way too much time. So well, I will set the example of The Witcher, and you will see it. You will see it. You'll see it. You'll see it. You'll see it that it is. Sleepy. Oh, you are also from Phantom's Club. That I need to stop playing League of Legends because my brain is totally fried. Need to wake up in 6 hours. Says Flying Energies. Oh, that's sad. Flying Energies. Phantom was like that on Thursday when I was playing Titan Quest. Exactly. It's absolutely terrible. Yeah. Oh well. My best wish is Flying Energies. My first wish is with the word. I know how it is. I was about to comment to Phantom. Now I'll get you to your example, Phantom. To the example for you, just so you see the point. That I was commenting that when I was back in law school, trapped. Literally being tortured because it was brutal. When I was back in law school, I would come back. I would come back, and I could, and I spent usually 8 hours without eating because it was like one class after the other, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. 8 hours without eating, easily. 8 hours without eating, easily, in that sense. So yeah. It was I can get that feeling of getting to those things. In my case, it was worse because it was also a career that I didn't like at all. But well, it's the same. We never work as the perfect thing that we like in general. So yeah. So all of the strength, Flying Energies, and you Phantom as well to both of you, and well, everyone in general. In that sense, everyone in general that has a tough job. So yeah, best wishes. I know in that sense, people. I understand that my stream after you come back from work is brutal because I start talking about all of those weird things. So yeah, it forces the brain to remain active in the background. So yeah, pretty much. Oh well. As difference is that in my case I have the option to order something to eat, but kept saying after this, after that, and like 7 hours pass by without eating. Damn it, that's brutal. That's brutal. In my case, I didn't have that option. Back in law school. I had to be 8 hours straight. Nowadays, yes, because it's different. I can teach the English through Zoom and develop the software on my own. It's like different, but I'm a fucking cockroach. No, don't say that, Phantom. Don't say that, because the cockroaches, you know that they can spend a lot of time without eating, and those fuckers survive. I can go without eating whole day, no problem. Yeah. In my case, it was the same. But there were people over at law school that couldn't survive that. Besides, it was like 1 hour class. Another one, it was like a total mental exhaustion. Didn't you have breaks? No, the motherfuckers wouldn't give us breaks because they said let's eliminate the break in between 45-minute sessions so we all end up faster. Actually, the degenerate teacher wanted to finish faster. I would make that illegal. The degenerate wanted to finish it faster so he could go to his job or whatever faster. It was in his own benefit in that sense. I would make that illegal. I would fire the person from the institution. Like, imagine having Roman law. I have my fucking manuals of Roman law here. I have a whole bookshelf up to the ceiling, all full of Roman books. Imagine going through those sheets without breaks for 8 hours every day. It's absolutely brutal in that sense. So yeah, I can get it. Some people like me, as like you mentioned, we could go without eating, without no problem, right? Of course, then I would have headaches. I would need to go to the cafeteria. Uh, by the end of it, I was broken. Ah, by the way, one detail that maybe you all don't know. This one will be interesting. You know that, contrary to really to what I was talking to Jacob, what I was talking to about with Jacob the other day, that I mentioned him that I was Argentine, and even though it says it in the description, but he thought I was European, precisely. A detail, which I am because of the secondary citizenship, as I said, but as I've said, one interesting detail is that you know that I studied European history, people, rather than it's not like in the U.S. that in the U.S. you know they only study, um, for example, American history. No, I had to study European history, of course, and then of course colonization of the Americas because of where I am. But I had to study European history instead of American, instead of any Argentine history was kind of like secondary in that sense. So, that's quite interesting in that sense. That's why you may all perceive or notice that sometimes I might be similar in those sense and those things, and also as well. Not only that, the law is exactly the same as in Italy and ancient Rome. So yeah, that implies, of course, studying all of that precisely. Well, an interesting detail. Going back to the other topic, I could stay without eating. I would get a headache or whatever. But there were people that I'll be honest with you, I felt terribly bad for them because they were. It was visually evident that without eating they were suffering. They were suffering. They were definitely suffering. And as I've said, some degenerates didn't give breaks to so they could finish faster, the own teachers, and I could see people getting visibly dizzy at some point after 2 hours of class without eating, then another 4 hours. Absolutely terrible because besides you had to retain what they were saying, of course. So, oh, what's this? Dimensional rift? Oh, it's a double-handed one. Seems quite good. Seems legendary. Oh well. But yeah, that's why. That's why it's definitely brutal. So, going back to the example regarding the storyline, Phantom, just so you have a down-to-earth example, so you don't have to think a lot because of how tired you are. That's so you get the point of more or less the topic that I was debating. In The Witcher 1, I know that most people haven't played The Witcher 1. It's quite old, boring, but it's an amazing game. I highly recommend it. You'll have the remake soon to experience it, but I think they are going to manipulate this part of it. As I was mentioning, the modern developers, don't you have the feeling that they use the fantasy setting of the games as an excuse to eliminate the problem of developing the complexity of cohesive medieval characters? That is, the characters in medieval fantasy games nowadays, do they act according to their personalities? I think not. For example, as I was mentioning previously to Jacob, it was a common feature in medieval ages precisely, in Europe, that the feudal lord could enter your house of the serfs and take your wife, precisely. He could take your wife. It was his property, technically, as you were under his protection. For example, those things. He could enter your house and say, your wife is coming with me, then I will return her. Right, for example, those things we cannot judge the medieval ages with modern eyes, with a modern mindset, because then we are distorting it. That seems absolutely silly, brutal, illegal, and terribly unfair nowadays, was a pact of protection that the feudal lord had with the serfs, because they were inside of the precisely of the city. It didn't get to state, but pretty much the castles uh, to protect them from bandits, because after the collapse of the Roman Empire, of the Western Roman Empire, the barbarians, the barbarian bandits took over all of that zone of northern Italy and Central Europe, precisely. So, if you compare that, having to tolerate that your that precisely the feudal lord could enter and take your wife, compare that to living under the following conditions: outside of the medieval castle, outside of the lands of the feudal lord, you would be killed straight up. So it was either that or being killed. In that context, as you can see, while it is still unfair and with progress and everything, it wasn't something crazy or out of the ordinary. For example, unlike that, several other things. I was mentioning that in The Witcher 1, the first chapter is basically a fight, a mental fight, let's say, a cultural fight between the medieval influence of the Italian Roman Catholic church against the Protestant influence, and all of that cultural charge. The first chapter of The Witcher is basically that Geralt has to enter I think it's Bizima. He has to enter the city, but the city is under lockdown because it has the equivalent of the Black Pest. Just so you have a reference, it has a specific name, a specific fantasy name, but basically that. So the road is locked, the entrance is locked, and the player has to unlock the entrance, basically. And for that, he explores the town as Geralt and everything, and he discovers that there's a character that is a witch, and they were doing a witch hunt, basically, and those things. Well, those concepts, they're all medieval concepts, real medieval concepts. The fight between Protestantism and Catholicism after the collapse of the Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire, and the void of authority in medieval ages in Europe, specifically in Central Europe. All of those topics are the medieval part of the games, and the characters act according to their personalities. For example, in The Witcher, as medieval characters. The same goes for Sacred 2. In Sacred 2, you also have this that I'm mentioning of the feudal lord taking those liberties and whatever over the serfs or those things. I feel that nowadays developers are trying to impose. They are trying to impose a modern interpretation of the medieval aspect of the medieval fantasy setting of the basically of the games, in that sense, of the games. Why? Well, because they are, and I think they are using the fantasy setting as an excuse. They are using it as an excuse to eliminate the effort, to not put in the effort to develop, characters that act cohesively according to their personalities. In Sacred 2, for example, if someone was a farmer, because in the medieval society there was no, contrary to our modern society, fortunately nowadays, if you were born as a serf, you would die a serf because it was stagnant in its social structure. They were fixed positions, right? And I feel that nowadays, that, for example, is not taken into account in a lot of games. Or, for example, the fact that, I don't know, in The Witcher, for example, there the Catholic Church had a huge authority. For example, in modern games, it's not even mentioned. For example, and it doesn't have to do with me being Italian. People, you know that I'm an atheist. It has to do with eliminating the realism, the effort, not putting in the effort to make a story with fantasy components, which is perfectly fine. A story with fantasy components have medieval characters that act according to their personalities. In that sense, you get what I say. Basically, that they use the fantasy setting as an excuse to eliminate the medieval setting. That is the main fourth point that I wanted to make. As for the rest, then we can talk about something more less, I don't know, complex, if you'd like, Phantom. If it's way too much for this hour of the night for all of you, we can talk about something more a lighter topic in that sense. No problem about it. But yes, basically that's the idea. That I feel they are using the fantasy setting as an excuse for to not put the effort of doing research and development to precisely have historically accurate medieval characters that act according to their personalities, while at the same time combining it with the fantasy components of The Lord of the Rings, which was the original idea of this genre, medieval fantasy. Indeed, that's the key. I feel that they are trying to eliminate the complexity of 50% of the story plot of this genre, basically of the elements of this genre. In that sense. Okay, people. Okay, and with that we have the fourth talking point of today. Conclusions regarding Drakensang Online. What would I say about the storyline? I think the critical mistake, the critical flaw, is the second talking point. The fact that the storyline is not tied together, that is isolated following the structure of World of Warcraft. I think that as the critical flaw, it's like World of Warcraft is the one aspect that keeps World of Warcraft from being a 10 out of 10. I would say. Is the one critical aspect that keeps World of Warcraft from being a 10 out of 10 game. That it would be a 99.99999. That the story plot is disconnected between zones. They are not tied together at all. You have isolated plots, and that's it. There isn't a common denominator in between them. As for the rest, positive aspects that I would highlight after highlighting the critical flaw is that the characters do act according to their personalities. It is true. I love the cultural variety of the characters that Drakensang Online has, following the classic formula of The Lord of the Rings, with the dwarves, with the different races, with, I don't know if it has elves, but it has humans, and it has, for example, this Atlantean people. I think it's quite original, this portion. The same goes for the distinctive difference between the North lands and, let's say, the central lands of Drakensang Online in that sense. So I would say, as out of the 4 talking points, things that I would highlight as flaws: it doesn't have a single dialogue line voiced. When the first game, Drakensang 1, that I was mentioning to Jacob at the beginning, does have at least the first dialogue line voiced for each character, following the formula of the Infinity Engines of the 90s of real-time with Pulse of Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale. At least have the first dialogue line of each quest voiced. This one doesn't have it, and it was developed in 2010 as opposed to 2008 of the first Drakensang, the Dark Eye, the tabletop game. So it's impossible to justify it. It should have at least the first dialogue line voiced, but that's a minor flaw, let's say, compared to the second one that I've said. It doesn't have the main story plot tied together. The plots are isolated, and that limits the potential that it could have. Why? Because the cultural ambience, the cultural context is a positive aspect. The characters act according to their personalities in this game. You have the dwarves being stubborn as a brief example of it, but you have characters that act according to their personalities. They do follow the structure of real medieval societies, even though it's not explored enough the topic, because it's limited in turn by the isometric action RPG genre that the game belongs to, so it's understandable. But just so you have a reference, for example, for all of its mistakes and everything, in the specific topic of the storyline, Diablo 3 has all of the characters voice acted, and it does have a connected storyline between all of the chapters. You could say that that game had a much bigger budget, and Blizzard already had money to do it and everything. Well, against that argument, I would say that Diablo 2, in a much earlier time of the gaming industry, in which budgets were much smaller, Diablo 2, as well as the first, as Titan Quest, the other one that we are playing on Thursdays, both games have fully voice-acted storylines and side quests, both of them fully voice-acted, with a lot of content as well, with a much smaller budget because of the variations in general budgets of